Welcome to Stories Thorn. I know you're playing this story to sleep now, so before you go to sleep, please subscribe to the channel and comment where you're from. Story 1. The night was darker than any Caleb Holloway could remember. Even the moon had vanished behind a curtain of clouds, leaving the dense forest shrouded in ink-like blackness. Every tree loomed tall and twisted, branches clawing at the night sky like the crooked fingers of forgotten dead things. The air hung heavy with mist, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something else, something metallic and sour. Caleb tightened his grip on the lantern he carried, its flickering flame barely cutting through the oppressive dark. He wasn't supposed to be here, deep within the Hollowvale woods, but something had drawn him, a pull he couldn't explain, stronger than logic, stronger than fear. His boots crunched over dead leaves, every step sounding impossibly loud in the suffocating silence. It wasn't just the absence of other people that unnerved him, it was the unnatural stillness of the forest itself. No rustling creatures. No chirping crickets. No hooting owls. It was as though life itself had fled, leaving the place a hollow shell, inhabited only by unseen eyes and the memories of old, terrible things. Caleb wasn't one for superstition, but even he felt the old stories pressing down on him, tales of disappearances, of people who wandered into these woods and were never seen again, leaving behind only their footprints, leading deeper and deeper, into nowhere. He told himself it was just a legend, a story meant to scare children and keep curious people away. But tonight, those old tales felt real, hanging in the air like invisible cobwebs clinging to his skin. As he pressed on, the mist thickened, swirling around him like living things. Shapes seemed to flicker just beyond the reach of his lantern's glow, and more than once he spun around, certain something was following him, only to find the emptiness stretching endlessly in every direction. Caleb had ventured into Hollowvale Woods to find the legendary Wraith House. The derelict manor had long since fallen into myth, a relic of an age when the forest was tamed by powerful families and terrible secrets were buried beneath thick stone walls. It was said the house still stood somewhere in the heart of the woods, sunken into the earth and twisted by time, a place where shadows moved on their own and mirrors reflected things that were not there. Caleb had heard the stories from old men in the tavern, their voices trembling, their eyes darting about as though afraid something might overhear them. The house was cursed, they said. The people inside had vanished during one moonless night like this, leaving behind only madness. He wasn't a fool. He didn't believe in curses or ghosts. But he believed in the thrill of discovery, in the satisfaction of proving those old tales wrong. And so he walked, deeper into the endless gloom, driven by a need he couldn't name. It felt as though the forest itself wanted him to find it. The path ahead narrowed, the trees crowding closer, their skeletal branches tangling overhead to form a canopy that blotted out the last of the night's light. The ground sloped downward, pulling him into a hollow where the mist was thickest, swirling around his ankles, clinging to his skin like icy fingers. After what felt like hours, a shape began to materialize in the fog, a silhouette of crumbling stone and twisted iron. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. There it was, rising from the earth like a rotting carcass, its walls leaning and sagging, windows shattered and gaping like blind, accusing eyes. The Wraith House. He approached cautiously, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The house seemed to breathe, the mist curling around it, seeping in and out of broken windows and doorways as though drawn by something within. The iron gate was rusted but still intact, held together by thick chains that had long since corroded. He pushed against it, and it gave with a groan that sounded too much like a dying animal. The courtyard was overgrown, weeds and vines choking what was once a grand garden, statues crumbled into indistinct lumps. Caleb's lantern guttered, the flame shrinking as though frightened. He forced himself forward, his heartbeat hammering in his chest. The front doors hung open, one crooked on its hinges. The darkness inside was total, pressing outward like a living thing, thick and impenetrable. Caleb hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But the pull was stronger now, a voice without words whispering from somewhere deep within, promising answers, promising something he didn't understand but desperately wanted. Inside, the air was colder still, heavy with dust and the scent of rot. His lantern barely illuminated the ruined grandeur, faded wallpaper peeling from the walls, portraits warped by moisture, furniture draped in moldy sheets. His footsteps echoed in the vast, empty halls. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister thick with grime. Strange symbols had been scratched into the walls, long gouges that seemed to shimmer when the light passed over them. Caleb made his way down a long corridor, doors hanging open on either side, each room a decaying relic of what once was. The floorboards groaned beneath his weight, threatening to give way. Shadows clung to the corners, watching, waiting. He found himself drawn toward a large chamber at the end of the hall, its doors half open. The room beyond was impossibly vast, far larger than the dimensions of the house should allow. And there, in the center of the room, was a massive mirror, its frame of dark wood carved into shapes too twisted to name. The glass shimmered like water, reflecting nothing of the room, only a swirling blackness that seemed to stretch into infinity. Caleb approached, mesmerized. His reflection never appeared, though the lantern's light flickered and bent against the glass. The surface rippled as though touched by an unseen hand. His heart pounded. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that to touch it would be to cross a boundary from which there was no return, but the pull was undeniable. His fingers brushed the cold glass, and at once, the world around him seemed to shatter. The room was gone, replaced by a formless void of shifting shadows and pale lights that moved like distant stars. He felt weightless, suspended between dimensions. Shapes moved in the darkness, tall, thin, inhuman. Their faces were featureless, yet he could feel their attention, a searing focus that burned against his soul. Voices spoke in unison, a language older than time, each word a note in an ancient, terrible song. Caleb felt his mind unravel, memories peeling away, replaced by images not his own. He saw the house as it had once been, alive with light and laughter, a place of power and fear. He saw the rituals, the sacrifices made to the old things that lurked beyond the veil. The people had given themselves willingly, seeking eternal life. But what they received was something far worse. One by one, he saw them pulled into the mirror, their bodies hollowed, their souls consumed. The house had become a prison, a vessel, a feeding ground for ancient hungers. And now, it had chosen him. Caleb tried to scream, but his voice was stolen, carried away by the endless void. He felt himself unraveling, threads of his being pulled into the dark, woven into the fabric of the house, to be used, to be devoured, to be made part of the ever-hungry reflection. When the world snapped back, he was still standing before the mirror. But it was no longer him. His body moved, but something else guided it, something cold and ancient, wearing his flesh like a mask. The house was silent, save for the distant ticking of a clock that had not worked in 100 years. The mist rolled in through the broken windows. And somewhere, deep in the mirror's glass, the last flicker of Caleb's true self screamed, trapped in eternal darkness. Time no longer passed in the house. Visitors were rare, but they came, drawn by stories, by curiosity. And when they did, the house awakened, and the thing that wore Caleb's face would greet them, always leading them to the same room, the same mirror, where their fates would be sealed. The house fed, and the darkness grew. Outside, the forest reclaimed the world. Trees grew taller, thicker. The mist became a permanent shroud. Roads vanished. Maps changed. The world forgot. And yet, some nights, a flicker of light would be seen in the woods, and the air would fill with the scent of wet earth and old blood. Story 2. There was a house on the outskirts of the old mining town of Hollowford, a place long abandoned and left to rot beneath the heavy weight of silence. They called it the Mercer House, after the family who had lived there over a century ago. No one had stepped through its rusted gates in decades, and those who passed by at night swore they heard the muffled sounds of splashing water, even though the nearest river was miles away. The house was said to be cursed, a drowning place where the walls wept salt water and the floors groaned with the weight of invisible tides. Elena Gray had always been drawn to stories like these, fascinated by the unknown and the forbidden. As a paranormal documentarian, she made a living chasing the shadows that others feared. recording the forgotten, piecing together the buried horrors of decaying towns like Hollowford. When she arrived in town, the locals barely spoke of the Mercer house, their eyes dark with unspoken warnings. The few who did only muttered that no one came back from there, and those who did were never quite whole again. The air around the Mercer house was heavy, thick with mist that clung to Elena's skin and made it feel as though she were wading through invisible water. The ground squelched beneath her boots, though no rain had fallen for days. The gates loomed ahead, coated in rust, vines choking the iron bars like skeletal hands. The house beyond was a ruin of warped wood and shattered glass, yet something about it remained unbroken, a presence, a pulse, as though the house itself still breathed. Elena raised her camera, its red recording light flickering in the gloom. She forced herself forward, the old gate creaking as it swung open with a sound like a drowning gasp. The air inside the courtyard was colder, and the mist thickened, carrying the faint scent of salt and old rot. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she spoke steadily into the camera, recounting the house's grim history. The Mercers, a family of 5, all lost to the floodwaters that rose inexplicably from within the house itself, the town helpless to save them. The front door stood ajar, its wood swollen and warped with age, but when Elena pushed against it, it yielded too easily, as though expecting her. Inside, the darkness was thick and pressing, broken only by the harsh glow of her flashlight. The house groaned and shuddered with every step she took, the floorboards damp beneath her feet, slick with moisture. The walls were streaked with water stains, dark and briny, carrying the unmistakable smell of the sea. Elena moved cautiously, the sounds of her breathing and the steady drip of unseen water the only sounds in the house. As she passed through the decaying living room, she noticed that the furniture was strangely intact, though covered in mold and mildew. Picture frames hung crookedly on the walls, their images faded, the faces within distorted by water damage. She could swear, for a moment, that the eyes followed her. The deeper she ventured, the stronger the scent of salt grew, and soon the floor became uneven, small puddles forming in the hollows of the rotting wood. Her boots splashed with every step, the sound unnervingly loud. She found herself drawn toward a doorway at the end of the hall, from which a faint, bluish glow emanated. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but the pull was undeniable. The door led to a basement staircase, each step slick with algae, the walls damp and crumbling. Elena descended cautiously, the light growing stronger, the sound of water growing louder. By the time she reached the bottom, the water was ankle-deep, and the room ahead shimmered with an eerie, unnatural glow. It was a massive chamber, the foundation of the house open to reveal a vast, subterranean pool, its surface unnaturally still, the water black as ink. Something ancient lurked within that water. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she panned her flashlight over the surface. Beneath the water, pale shapes floated, unmoving, faces, limbs, bodies suspended in the dark. The Mercer family. Their features distorted by the water, their eyes wide and staring, mouths frozen in silent screams. A cold dread settled in her bones. They weren't decayed, not bloated or rotting as they should be after a century. They looked freshly drowned. The water rippled. A sound broke the silence, soft at first, a low, distant gurgling. Then came the splash, a single drop, followed by another, until the water's surface was alive with tiny disturbances. Elena's pulse quickened. Something was rising. Shapes began to move, bodies shifting, limbs twitching. The Mercer family was waking. She stumbled backward, her boot catching on something submerged. The water surged suddenly, rising to her knees in seconds. A voice, gurgling and wet, rose from the pool, speaking her name, the syllables thick with water. The drowned figures turned toward her, their eyes glowing faintly, their arms reaching. Elena spun, racing back up the stairs, the water chasing after her like a living thing. The house shuddered, the walls weeping briny tears, the floor buckling. The front door loomed ahead, but the water was faster. It slammed into her back, pulling her under, her camera vanishing into the depths. Cold, suffocating darkness closed in. But it wasn't water. It was something else, thick, heavy, ancient. It dragged her down, into the drowning room, where the Mercer family waited. Faces pressed against hers, lips moving in slow, underwater chants. She felt herself unraveling, her memories flooding out, her body becoming weightless, drifting. When she opened her eyes, she stood among them, another pale figure floating in the eternal gloom, her mind silent, her body cold. The Mercer family turned, returning to their watery rest, and Elena followed, a new resident in the house's endless drowning. And above, in the empty house, the water receded, the floors drying, the walls falling silent once more. But the next time someone passed by on a misty night, they would hear it, the splash of unseen tides, the soft voice calling for them to enter. The house was always hungry, and the drowning room always had room for one more story. 3. There was a patch of land at the farthest edge of the old Ashmore woods that the townsfolk avoided, a place known as Gallows Edge. Long ago, criminals had been brought there to meet the noose, their last gasps fading beneath a crooked oak tree that still stood, its branches bare and twisted like brittle fingers against the gray sky. The land was cursed, they said, though no one spoke of it in daylight. For years, the ground lay barren, a hollow scar upon the earth. That was, until someone built a house there. The house at Gallows Edge was no ordinary dwelling. It was a monstrous thing, tall and narrow, with walls made of dark, weathered wood that seemed to bleed in the rain. No one knew who built it. It had appeared, as if overnight, standing defiantly where no sane person would raise a home. The windows were always dark, and the crooked chimney belched black smoke even when no one was seen entering or leaving. For as long as anyone could remember, stories spread of strange lights moving behind the grimy panes, of terrible sounds drifting down to the town on windless nights. Children dared each other to cross the threshold, and few returned with their minds intact. Those who did spoke of impossible rooms, of staircases that turned back upon themselves, and of whispers that knew your name. One evening, a man named Victor Mallory arrived in Ashmore, a stranger with a pale face and eyes like polished glass. He carried no luggage, save for a small, battered case that he never let out of his sight. The townsfolk watched him warily, and when he made inquiries about the house at Gallows Edge, no one spoke. It was only the old innkeeper, a man bent with age and thick with drink, who muttered, "It won't take kindly to you, stranger." Victor only smiled. By the next morning, he had taken up residence in the cursed house, its doors opening for him as though recognizing an old friend. Days turned to weeks, and the town spoke of how the land around the house withered, how the air itself seemed colder, heavier. Animals avoided it, and strange marks appeared on the surrounding trees, symbols that no one could translate. At night, shadows moved behind the windows, and the sound of weeping could be heard long after midnight. Victor Mallory, however, seemed to thrive. His pale skin remained unblemished, his glassy eyes unblinking. Occasionally, townsfolk would glimpse him in the market, his hands gloved even in the warmth of summer, his voice soft as silk. Yet no one dared question him, for an unseen weight hung about him like a suffocating shroud. There was something old about him, something wrong. Then, one evening, Victor vanished. No one saw him leave, but for days afterward, a rancid stench drifted down from the house at Gallows Edge. The smoke from its chimney turned a sickly green, and the ground seemed to pulse beneath the withered grass. The bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, of the townsfolk decided to investigate. They found the house standing silent, the front door ajar, revealing only darkness within. Inside, the house was impossibly vast. Corridors stretched on forever, each one lined with crooked doors, some too small for a person to pass through, others towering into unseen heights. The walls bled a dark, tar-like substance that carried a foul, metallic stench. There was no sign of Victor, save for the battered case, resting atop a table in a room that did not exist on any floor plan. One man dared to open it. Within the case was a single item, a black, withered rope, coiled neatly, its fibers stiff with age. And as the townsmen touched it, 1,000 voices rose in a chorus of agony, the room shuddering as though alive. The house changed then, walls folding and unfolding, windows blinking like dead eyes. The floor fell away, And the townsfolk fled, the house swallowing the brave man whole. From that night onward, the house at Gallows Edge became a thing of hunger. People vanished. Nights grew longer. Shadows thickened. And the air grew heavier, as though the sky itself mourned for those lost to the house. No one ventured near it now. Even the animals avoided the land, and the old oak tree seemed to twist in horror, but the house was not empty. Within, rooms stretched into impossible dimensions, filled with relics from forgotten times. An ancient noose hung in the great hall, swaying though no breeze blew. Portraits lined the walls, their eyes following intruders, their faces half-rotted but still leering. And in the deepest chamber, something vast and old stirred, bound in chains of shadow and regret. It was said that the house grew from the roots of the old hanging tree, that it was fed by blood and despair. Victor Mallory had not built the house, he had been called by it, chosen to awaken whatever horror slept within its walls. Now, with him gone, the house no longer slept. It hungered. Nights in Ashmore grew colder. Fog rolled in from nowhere, thick and cloying. People spoke of shapes moving within it, figures tall and skeletal, faces covered in sackcloth, ropes hanging from their necks. Doors locked themselves, windows frosted from within. The town was dying, and all paths led to Gallows Edge. The last of the brave entered the house one autumn night. A group of 6, hunters, priests, fools. They carried holy relics and torches, speaking prayers in shaking voices. They did not last long. The house consumed them, their screams stitched into the very walls. The townsfolk heard them for weeks, ghostly voices pleading from beneath the floorboards. Years passed. The house remained, untouched by decay, untouched by time. Its chimney still smoked. Its doors still waited. Those who dared to listen heard a voice in the wind, calling them by name, promising release, promising power. And sometimes, on mist-heavy nights, a figure could be seen in the upper window, a man with pale skin and glassy eyes, holding a noose in one hand, beckoning. No one dared go closer. The house at Gallows Edge became legend, a name spoken only in hushed tones, a place marked only by a crooked signpost in the memory of those lost. And somewhere deep inside, Victor Mallory waits, his flesh long gone, his spirit bound to the thing that called him. The house watches, and hungers, and remembers.